My parents decided to move from the city of Norfolk to Presbyterian County, which ultimately became the city of Virginia Beach. And we really were improving then. I was still in a segregated school, but it was a new one. Because somewhere between the Pupil Placement Board and the Freedom of Choice thing, some places said, well, let's just build new schools and put the black kids in it, and they'll look like they're equal, and we won't have to deal with that. So that was the Virginia Beach approach. Now, it's really hard to characterize what happened because each place did something different. So it's easy to say, oh, that didn't happen, because you just may not have had that experience. But this is my experience. So I go to Virginia Beach, and I'm really excited because I'm in a cool school. The school's new. It's got a cafeteria inside. It's got all the amenities. I've got a single classroom with a teacher in it. People are loving and nurturing, and it's a great place. I'm happy. Not that I was unhappy in the other school. I just didn't like when it rained and other things, having to go outside to go to the bathroom. That really wasn't fun. And it was an ordeal because in those days, kids had to get passes on all that kind of crazy stuff that they don't really use a lot anymore. So I had to do that. So I'm excited. I'm thinking I'm settled in, it's okay. My parents had moved us from the city to the country. We weren't happy, my brother and I. We weren't happy, so this was an okay thing. I'm like, okay, we can deal with this. So imagine, I'm there, I moved there, I'm in the 3rd grade. By the time I get in the 4th grade, my parents come to me and say, we're gonna move you again. I'm not a happy camper. I say, where am I going? They say, you're going to Bayside Elementary. Well, by that time, freedom of choice had come into place, and my parents had opted to send my brother and I to this white school. What my parents told me was, you're going there, you will perform, you will be called names, people might not be nice to you, and we really don't care. That is not the purpose for why you're going there. You're going there to learn. You're going there, you need to understand you have to be on your best behavior, and the things that other people can do, you may not be able to do. But we're not sympathetic. Don't come home crying. This is the way it's going to be. That's not cool. But being the obedient child that I was, I went. So I started in the 5th grade at Bayside Elementary School. Me and a handful of other kids, my brother included. What I realized with freedom of choice was you had to make an application just like you had to do everything else, because you know we got to make sure we get the right ones here in the school. So we passed the test apparently. And what they did was to put at least one black child in each class. And the elementary school went from 1st grade to 7th grade. That's the way they did it in Virginia Beach in the day. We didn't have junior high schools. And if you were lucky, you might get 2. And if you got 2 in a class, you got a girl and a boy. Because God forbid you really couldn't mix. I do not have fond memories of that time in school. So I go to school, starting in the 5th grade, from the 5th grade to the 7th grade, in elementary school. And of course, you know, those are the times when you have those little dumb dances. They probably don't do that anymore, where you push the chairs up against the wall, and you know, you had a Valentine's Day dance, and you had all that kind of stuff. Well, when we had those things, it was not fun for me. I didn't have anybody that would dance with me, except for Everett Duke, who was a black kid in my class, who lived in my neighborhood and whom I hated. Okay, he didn't like me too much either. But he and I were good for each other because we became each other's competition. Because we didn't have a whole lot of kindness being extended to us initially. So Mitch and I had to figure out how to make do with ourselves, so we became very competitive. If he got an A, I had to get an A+, vice versa. Because that was the only person I had to measure myself against. Well, in time, by the time we got to the 7th grade, you know, things had settled down a little bit. People knew that we didn't have cooties and we didn't bite. We did get called names. But, you know, I remember, again, like I told you, my father made it very clear that we knew who we were, and any name that would be called of us would not be true. We knew that wasn't true, and we should not succumb to it. That's really good in principle, but it's really hard to live. But we got through. We got through. My brother had a harder time because he was younger, and he just didn't have all of the skills that I had developed. Well, that was when I learned to navigate the world. People were never overtly ugly, but I didn't feel as nurtured and cared for in that setting as I had in the 2 previous school settings I had when I'd been in segregated schools. At least when I was there, I felt like people believed I could do anything. When I was in the integrated school, or the desegregated school, I didn't actually have that warm and fuzzy. It was like, you're here, you got to be here, we're going to tolerate this, and we're all going to get through it. And that was sort of the way I kind of came through school. I go to high school. And, you know, I've been in elementary school with most of these kids now, so we're okay. When we get to high school, things are a little bit better. But this is a very social time, okay, for a teenager. And it was not easy. I don't really remember having a high school experience like other people did. But it didn't stop me, because I thought I could do anything. You know how arrogant little kids can be, too. My son took on some of those characteristics. I believed I could be a class officer. I believed I could do anything, and I did. I tried. And eventually, I actually won. I actually became class treasurer. Now, ironically, they began holding class meetings outside of the school at people's houses, so I couldn't get there. They have secret meetings, and I had a spy, this one white friend of mine that I had basically from elementary school named Michelle LeClaire. Her parents were French Canadian, and they thought this stuff was stupid. They didn't really understand the rules either. But, you know, Michelle would go find out where the meeting was, and I'd show up with Michelle, and then that would be like havoc, okay? They couldn't deny me, but they didn't want me there either. So that just became my life, you know. Girls' State came along. I applied to go to Girls' State. I remember them telling me, well, we've never had a black student go to Girls' State. I said, well, I want to go. And they said, well, we don't know what the American Legion's going to do. I said, well, I'm going to apply. And I did apply, and I did get accepted. I served on the Mayor's Youth Council when I was in high school. So I had great experiences, even though I was lonely in many of those experiences. You would look at me and be saying, oh, what a trailblazer, wasn't that great? It was great, but I just didn't have a whole lot of friends. I didn't have people invite me to go to things and do things. And the school was still basically a handful of us. It was so bad that when Martin Luther King was killed, the principal, the morning that happened, gathered all of us up and brought him in his office. There wasn't that many black kids at the school because they were afraid we were going to riot. We hadn't done anything, but they were afraid we were going to riot. And being the brash young lady that I was at the time, I suggested that the principal send us home if he thought we were going to riot, and everybody could be at peace. And lo and behold, they got us a bus. I called my father and said, I'm at home. He said, what are you doing out of school? I said, the school let us come home because Martin Luther King died. He was not happy with me. It was like Alda. He suspected that I was at the base of that, and that was true. I had something to do with it. I had a little friend that was also a companion of mine. We were little troublemakers sometimes. But in any event, you know, we're moving along, bumping along fine. The second semester of my junior year of high school, the court, I now know it was the courts, I should have known it wasn't the benevolence of the city fathers in Virginia Beach. The courts, in a decision that went to the Supreme Court in 1968 called Green versus New Kent County, had declared that freedom of choice was not school desegregation. Believe it or not, this is now 1971. Remember, I was born in 1954. Brown came down in 1954. This is 16, almost 17 years later. Well, they have one black high school, and many of you may be familiar with that. They have one black high school, so they closed down that high school, and they're going to disperse those kids all out over the city. Imagine what it feels like if you are a football star, a basketball star, a cheerleader, or whatever you may be in your school, and you're being told you're being split up and sent all over everywhere. Well, they knew they were going to have problems. So then they came up with the great idea that they were going to use the black students they had dispersed throughout the other high schools as guides for the kids coming from the black high school, to let them see what it was like and let them know that it's nice and okay. I can't tell you what that experience was like. It was awful. I went from having worked my way up to being acceptable to the white kids that I had gone to elementary school with. And now I've got to start off with a bunch of angry kids who are coming in that don't want to be there for lots of different reasons, which I now understand. I didn't necessarily understand that at the time. So it was, again, another horrible time in my life. I went from being somebody that had become accepted to someone that was back to not being accepted again. But this time it hurt even more because it was people that looked like me. Okay? So my senior year of high school is not something I look back on with fondness, because when they came to the school, it was somewhat disruptive. Kids came in that had been stars at Union Kempsville, and all of a sudden they're sitting on the bench. Other people remember this is a time when people are looking for scholarships and if they're athletes and stuff. It was creating a problem. It was creating a problem. I couldn't wait to get out of there. Couldn't wait. And I was angry at my parents for what they had done to me. I'm a child fighting an adult battle, and I had fought it for a long time. So essentially, in the city of Virginia Beach, it took 17 years to integrate the schools from the Brown decision. Now, I tell that story, that's a long story, but I tell that story to help people appreciate that, one, everything just didn't happen in the 60s and it went away. Okay? If that was your experience, that's fine, but that was not my experience, and my experience is not all that unique. My husband's experience, even when I met him, was different because he had been in school much earlier than I had with white kids. But his story, when I would go places where people would always, you know what they would say about him? And they didn't mean it in a mean way. They would say, I remember when he shined my shoes. Not his accomplishments. They remembered that he shined their shoes at the barbershop his father owned here in town. Okay? And, you know, under normal circumstances, that could be insulting at best. We all had learned to let this stuff fall off our back. It's the thing that I tell people, don't look at me and tell me you didn't notice I'm black, because that's a lie. And when you do that, I know you're not being genuine. Tell me you notice that I'm black, but it doesn't matter, and I'm okay with that.